All right, so as I mentioned, my name is Doug Reifschneider. I'm a CMO with Chief Outsiders. Chief Outsiders is a national management consulting firm that specializes in fractional and part-time CMOs, and we've got CMOs within our, what we call the tribe, that are battle tested and have been parts of industries all over the country. And it's also, we've got industrial people, manufacturing people. My background happens to be restaurants. We're not just restaurant folks. And I think the key thing to understand is that we are very much big about helping firms grow, and our target audience is our small to medium-sized firms of 10 to about 300 million in sales, and particularly looking for CEOs that are struggling with realizing their growth plans because their internal team can't do it, or they're just not quite sure what to do. What I want to do today to share with you is some things we call stopping random acts of recovery, or random acts of marketing in this particular case. And I'm going to start out with a thought, because in the vein of stopping random acts of recovery, we all have a choice to make when we run a business. And John Maxwell once said, "The pessimist complains about the wind, the optimist expects it to change, and the leader adjusts to sails." And I think since we're all leaders, it's up to us to adjust to sails. So as far as the agenda today, I want to give some context for planning for recovery, and a brief highlight into what are the growth gears. And I'm going to kind of describe what the difference is between running a company and growing a company. If we were person to person, would ask the question, and like, what is marketing, all of you, and we kind of go through that, but we won't have time for that today. And realize that this particular presentation is meant to share the concepts that Chief Outsiders helps companies grow with. But it was originally about a 48 slide, 90-minute deal, and I've cut it down to 6 to 8 minutes if I time it right, Jim. So first of all, we've got a relationship with ITR Economics, and if you'll notice down at the bottom, they're known as first in forecasts worldwide. That's because they've got a 96% accuracy rate with forecasting the future. What's beautiful about this chart, whereas you may have seen some economists that were forecasting GDP to be minus 15%, minus 20%, minus 35% in second quarter, third quarter, big double digits for the year. They're a lot more bullish on the economy, and based on their U.S. gross domestic product, how they've tracked it anywhere from, going back to the 08, 09, 10 recession we had back here up to now, they're looking at 2020 being down 2.1%, and 2021 should come back with a pretty strong recovery. At 3.6% would be a pretty darn good year for us. And in case you're wondering, the SAAR, that's the seasonally adjusted annual rate, and all the dollars are chained to 2012. But the bottom line is ITR Economics sees us coming out of this sooner than most and better than most other economists do, and we happen to think they're on the right track because of their history. All right, so we also have a relationship with VISTAGE, and VISTAGE did a survey, and they asked all their CEOs, to what degree have your revenues been impacted by the coronavirus pandemic in the last month? Only 26% said there was no change, or maybe they even increased in sales, and I think we've all seen some industries that are doing quite well. But basically 75% said we've been hit by 25% loss or more, which is pretty significant. So that's the area of economy that we're living in today. Now, they also have a what they call the corona curve. You think about what we've done, and what most businesses have done is, when the thing hit, after we got past the denial stage and we realized this is really going to happen, the market crashed, the NBA suspended their season, the Tom Hanks, we learned he had COVID, etc. Every company went into a crisis strategy mode, which makes sense. Then as we searched for the bottom, people started to look at pivot strategies, and pivot strategies are pretty interesting. And like in the restaurant business in particular, lots of pivot strategies were out there, and I think we've already touched in the early part, the coffee talk section, where some restaurants sold flour and gave away toilet paper and things like that. So lots of industries found ways to pivot to take advantage, or at least not die on the vine as they went through here. And now that we finally hit the bottom, at least we think we have, companies are starting to prepare for growth. And at some point, you've got to start thinking about reopening, doing a thrive strategy and getting to a grand reopening stage. And we believe that time is now. So are you going to survive, or are you going to thrive? And the key is, and Mark, you hit this on this pretty hard twice this morning already, you got to start with insights. And what I mean by that, I'll explain a little bit later. First, I wanted to talk about what it is between the difference between running versus growing a company. Because Chief Outsiders did a survey with the University of Texas several years ago, and they found out that sometimes the best operated companies had the most difficult time growing. And what that means is the great companies that are great at running a company have an internal view, and they do everything great within their four walls, and they optimize everything within the four walls. Growing a company actually takes the ability to look outside the four walls. What's going on in the industry? What's the competition doing? What are consumer trends changing, et cetera? So you have to align what's outside to what's inside. In general, marketing growth comes from four sectors. Where will your recovery come from, or where will your growth come from if we're not in a recovery mode? This particular grid is shared by many consultants. It's done in many marketing textbooks. The horizontal line, if you will, of the graph is about product and service. The vertical one is for customers. So most companies do a very good job of gaining share by selling their products and services to their customers, or getting some lookalike customers and getting more customers that look like their current customers with their current products. If you go up to the top left segment, that's when you go for new customers with your product and service, like you enter new markets. In the food business, it's entering a new market. In other companies, it's entering a different part of the market. The bottom right corner is when you actually add new offerings, new products, limited time offers, things like that. Those three quadrants are the ones that are best used. The top right quadrant, new markets and offerings, if you try to go to a new market and with new offerings, that is the most risky of all growth strategies. But if you hit it right with your research and insights, it can be the most rewarding as well. So just the kind of things you have to think through as you go through, in this case, recovery in general. How do I want to grow my company? So marketing for most mid-sized companies looks like this. It's all about the execution. We need a new website. Hey, let's go to that trade show. Well, I think we should do some social media, things like that. But what is marketing? If you take that list, this is what marketing looks like. It's just execution. It's like, let's refresh the logo. Let's do some new sales collateral. Let's go to some trade shows. Maybe we do some advertising, some PR. But in reality, marketing is bigger than that. So the things I just described are what we consider little m marketing on the right side of the screen, but big M marketing, where you look at insights. And insights is like, what do you know about your company? It's very important that companies are aligned internally. What do you know about your customer? Mark Fonseca said a lot about that earlier, and I agree totally with everything he said. It's like we've all taken a page out of each other's playbook. And then you get down to strategy. What kind of products and services? What are your offerings? Well, how are you going to distribute your product? What's your go-to-market strategy? How do you differentiate yourself from other brands and things like that? So that's really what marketing is. Marketing in general is getting customers the products they want, when they want it, where they want it, etc. All right, so here's a picture of the growth gears. And when you think about growing a company and use a bicycle analogy, if you're riding a bicycle and you just keep pedaling faster, which is what the internally focused CEOs and management teams do, they can get some growth, they get going faster. But what if you add an extra gear and you can go even faster than that, and then add a third gear and go faster than that, and it helps you grow exponentially over time. And so what we've learned, and this is really taking years of infrastructure together, because I've done this for many firms in my background, and there are different ways, different brand architectures, different ways to look at growing sales or building a marketing plan. And these guys, in a book that they actually wrote called The Growth Gears, simplified it as best as anybody ever has. So first of all, you need to start with insights, as I mentioned earlier. You need to understand your customers, the competitors, and your own self within the company. That helps you set up strategy, helps determine which markets you're going to go into, what kind of offerings you're going to have, how you're going to position yourself against the competition. And then finally, when you've got that up figured out, you go into execution. So insight tools are many. I'm not going to go through all these details to stay on time. Just kind of whet your appetite. This is more for a B2B client. In restaurants, I'm more to business consumer customers. But whether you're looking at a website, the efficiency of a website by using a website, grader.com, whether you're doing key account executive interviews, looking at net promoter scores through different consumer voice of the customer surveys, the infamous SWOT analysis, all those things help set you up to understand your company, customers, and competitors. You follow that into strategy, and you determine, you know, how are you going to grow, which quadrant you're going to go after. You're going to go after some new offerings with your product or service, or are you going to go after some new customers with your current offerings? It's important to see this little graph down here in a big room. You couldn't all see this, and I've got to get rid of this there. If you look right here, what customers want, what you have to offer, your ideal position is going to be in this spot here that I'm using the cursor, because if you actually have what you have to offer, what customers have to give, that means that customers maybe don't want it. You've got a product or service nobody wants, so don't go there. And that's where you've got to figure that out as part of this research doing strategy. It also helps to understand buyer personas, get your positioning, it's a time to address pricing, things like that. Then finally, when you get to execution, we break it down into resources. So what people and what kind of dollars or budget do you have to execute your plan? What kind of tactics are you going to use? Are you going to use those small M marketing tactics to actually get your word out and build brand awareness? And then also you want to determine which metrics you want to use to actually measure your successes and measure what you've done, so you can move forward and test and learn, etc. So how do you stop random acts of recovery, or how do you do random or stop random acts of marketing? First of all, realize that running a business and growing a business are two different things. And you definitely need to start with market insights, and you need to align your strategy to your insights for a high confidence plan. And something I didn't have time to address, but we did address in the what do we see in the future, companies, whether they be B2B or B2C, have to get 2 times or 3 times better at what they're doing in the digital world, because the customer is going further down the digital funnel, sales funnel, than they ever were before. And actual salespeople are talking to potential prospects later than they used to. Then finally, you need in a B2B world, you need to align sales and marketing. In my world of restaurants, marketing and operations have to be aligned. And remember, and this is the key step, not only do you start with insights, but you got to remember that the execution stuff is the last step. And there's we also have one of our managing partners in California wrote this book, Stop Random Acts of Marketing, which is really like the sequel to the Growth Gears book that I mentioned earlier. And if you think about this, and going back to that Corona curve, we suggest, and I think all you probably are doing this with your clients too, recovery planning needs to start now so you're ready for the future, because at some point, potentially a year from now, you wish you had started today if you don't. I thank you, and that's it. Turn it back over to you, Jim.
Great. Thanks, Doug.